All right. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Hello, folks. How you doing? I hope you're doing really well, all things considered. It's a beautiful day in the quarantine. It's snowing a little bit over here. But let's get right to it because I want to make sure that you have enough time to live your best lives. So, last time we were talking about the end of the war. We finished up our overview. We talked about a bunch of our major battles. And we're going to start talking about trench warfare and tanks. I'm going ahead and start my timer. Now, you'll notice I may have already drawn a couple of things. This is because I am now encountering some new and interesting problems. For example, haven't figured out, feel free to laugh at me for this, but I haven't figured out how to get rid of my hey, you got an email sound. So that's fun. So if you hear that, please listen for that. And I was previously recording this video and one of you posted in my classroom and the notification was just enough where I was recording on my screen that you could see your name. And I was like, I'm not putting children's names out on the internet. Nuh-uh, that's not a thing that's happening. So here we have a previously started drawing about trench warfare. How exciting. Okay, so over here we have Mr. Tank, and then over here we have Mr. Tank. He's so nice. Now, Mr. Tank is not actually that great. Your reading was like, oh yeah, tanks, they were fabulous. They could, like, go places of rough terrain. No, they really couldn't. So a couple of fun facts about tanks. First of all, they look kind of like Daleks, don't they, for those of you who are fans of Doctor Who? Yet that's intentional. Secondly, they were transported over to the front from Britain, and Britain didn't want people to know that they were transporting war materials, so they called them water tanks, and the name stuck. Thirdly, I suppose, they only went about 5 miles an hour, and they really did not go that well over rough terrain. So if there was like a big rock or a little ditch or something, the tanks were like, oh dear, whatever shall I do? I think I'll just whack into the rock. And everybody was like, are we stopped? And the tank is like, yes, we're stopped. But they had guns in them, and that was cool. Neat. Okay, so I was talking about trench warfare, and I started my little trench drawing down here, as you will see. So just starting to go through everything. Usually, you would have your trench proper, or several layers of trenches, actually. Usually there was like the front trench, and then there was like 2 or 3 trenches after that. Then as you exited your trench, usually up some steps or a little ladder, or possibly some sandbags. That's what these are. These guys are sandbags. You would usually have to go through or scale some really large pointy sticks covered in barbed wire, which is so fun, and that's what this is, until you would run out to get to the actual battlefield, which is in the middle of no man's land. Called no man's land because if you went out there, you were no longer a man because you were dead. So here we have our little skull representing all of the dead people. And this is supposed to be a landmine. How exciting. Skull. Usually, though, they did pretty good about actually going and getting their casualties from no man's land. This is a landmine. No, I'm not 100% sure that a landmine is totally accurate for this time period. Usually, though, if you ventured out to no man's land, your biggest problem would be from snipers on the other side. And very often, like if you ventured out to no man's land, that is what killed you. Is that a sniper would see you moving out there, and then they would get you. So everybody's trenches were dug just far enough away from sniper action. But even then, it's not a 100% guarantee, and sometimes people would like run out to no man's land and make themselves a foxhole and you didn't know. So like somebody would come out, they would make a foxhole, it was just a one-person trench essentially, and then you have a sniper unexpectedly closer to you. So you tried really, really, really to like never lift your head above the trench because you could be hit by a sniper. And you also tried to do things like not light cigarettes, because if it was nighttime and you lit a cigarette, hello, immediate target for your sniper. And then usually back here, after the secondary and tertiary trenches, you would have like aid stations and more permanent housing and lodging and like the post office and supplies and stuff like that, because you weren't in the trenches 24/7 indefinitely. Usually your units went in shifts, but the shifts were usually like several days long, or like if you're in the middle of a battle, obviously you can't be like, oh, it's time for tea, bye-bye. Like, you got to finish your battle kind of a thing. So this gentleman in here is very sad. He is mostly sad because this is a puddle of disgusting bacteria-filled water. And some bad things are going to happen with this water. First off, he might get trench foot, but we'll talk about that in a second because I want to cycle through my pictures really quick. Here we have our tanks, our poor horsey. Even through World War II, people still used animals as part of the wartime effort. So lots of like horses and dogs, and I think the Polish army even had a bear at one point, were used as part of the war effort. Okay, here we go. Trench warfare. Right. So, again, they could be single holes, which were called foxholes, or they could be really complex structures with, tunnels leading in between them. Sometimes they had sort of very elaborate layouts, all of that kind of stuff. But they're cold, wet, dirty, and full of disease. So, talking about trench foot. Trench foot is where you cannot get your feet dry, and therefore, essentially, your feet start to rot in your shoes. Now, when I was researching this previously, I discovered that it can take as little as 48 hours for you to get trench foot. So if you get your shoes wet and you're unable to keep them dry because, hello, you're fighting in, France in the middle of winter and it's cold and it's rainy and it's snowy and it's terrible and you're stuck in this trench where it's muddy and sloppy and disgusting and you're stuck there for 3 days, you could potentially get trench foot even though you're in there only 3 days. And again, it's cold, it's dirty, it's full of disease from like these water puddles that are full of bacterium and, people relieving themselves anywhere they can and stuff like that. So like maybe you were out here, you got shots, but nothing super critical, but then they drag you back to the trench. And in the trench, you pick up a bunch of bacterias in your wound, so you eventually do die of your wounds, even though they were initially non-threatening. So trenches were really nasty and disgusting. Long-range artillery weapons, too, they're really starting to get into the good long-range artillery weapons. So they're starting to have artillery weapons that can fire, quarter mile, half a mile kind of a thing. And they've also started doing poisonous gases, like chlorine gas or mustard gas. And these are things that, when they are released, tend to just sort of eat your lungs from the inside out and blind you and fun stuff like that. There's all kinds of new technology. We have all of these chemical gases. We also have airplanes. Pew, pew, pew. This is the airplane. I'm an airplane. That's the most awful airplane. I'm just gonna... Nope. I'm an airplane. Airplanes were not super helpful, though, because these are, like, the really old-school propeller planes, where, like, you might see in the Mummy movie where you strap somebody onto a wing kind of a thing. And, so these planes are not super useful for fighting. They really haven't figured out... They sort of have, but they haven't super figured out the whole, like, drop bombs using planes kind of a thing. That's all to come in the next World War. And they're still really unsafe, and they're not pressurized. They don't have cockpits at this point, so you can only fly so high. And anyways, fun stuff. Here's a picture of some dudes in a trench, so you can see that, like, it's not the worst, but I also wouldn't want to be there. Ever. Sort of generically, unless I went there as like this is a totally terrible situation, sort of, sobering field trip kind of a thing. Here's another trench. That looks even worse. Just really, really gross and horrible. Here's another one that's a little bit more built up. So sometimes you would have causeways in between trenches. Sometimes you would have sort of almost little steps built into the trenches so that you could, scooch up if you were trying to hit people and stuff like that. This one is a lot like cleaner and neater. And oh, here's a dude sleeping over here. I really hope he's sleeping and not something else. Anyways, a lot of times they could be really, really nice, but depending on the time, the effort, it's not always a guarantee that you're going to get a nice trench or that you're going to be in there for, a short enough time that you're not going to get some kind of illness. Here's some more troops in the trenches. I appreciate how they've got all their rifles lined up and they're just like, yeah, I'm just gonna wait, hang out. Notice several of these dudes smoking too. Here's the early planes that I was talking about that I was trying to draw a really bad picture of. So we have our little pilot over here. It doesn't even look like they have a windshield. That's terrible. So like, this is like bottom tier. Like, I feel like some of our drones are nicer than this today, kind of a thing. And it's just not great for like legit like airplane warfare. It's not really good for that. And it's definitely not good for long distance. It's not good for up high, and it's not really good for doing things like dropping bombs. What? Who knew? Here's a submarine. I would not have wanted to have been part of a submarine crew during this time period. They were still really, really early, and there were lots of people who were like, oh, we've died in our submarine just because we couldn't figure out how to get out, or something locked, or something went horribly wrong, and we all suffocated in here. Horrifying, horrifying stuff. Here's another picture of a tank. Look how cute it is. It does not have the turret, so it doesn't look as much like a Dalek. How sad. Ah, there's the Dalek tank. Oh, yes, that is so classic. Also, if you haven't watched Doctor Who, go watch Doctor Who, but start with David Tennant, because he's the best. You can skip Christopher Eccleston and all the stuff from the 60s and 70s. Okay, so, the very end, we have the Treaty of Versailles. Okay, so the Treaty of Versailles is kind of wildly unfair and not super complicated. Basically, the United States is like, hey, we have lots of good ideas, and everybody else is like, these are great ideas, and then the United States is like, okay, we're not actually going to participate. Bye! Sort of a thing. So, basically, everybody blames Germany. Because technically, Germany was the guy who started it all. Technically. Now, the reason they started it all was because they had a bigger, stronger military, and so Austria-Hungary went over to Germany and said, pretty please help. And Germany said, oh, all right, I'll get the whole thing started for you. I'll help you out. So Germany was just being a good friend. It's just not fair they got blamed for everything. So, they are forced to pay what are called reparations to repair. Not spelled that way, but pay reparations to the tune of $33 billion. Yeah, that's B with a capital B. That is a huge amount of money. Even today, that is a huge amount of money. And again, Germany has lost, and so they really don't have that money. So what ends up happening is, first of all, their economy tanks super hard. Their economy is just wrecked. But then what they end up doing is they're taking loans out from the United States and then paying those loans back to like Great Britain, France, not Russia because they're busy, who then pay back their loans that they took from the United States when they were actually like fighting the war proper and stuff like that. And then, oh, hey, it goes back to Germany. But it's okay because as we talked about earlier, every time you move money, money is made. Somebody makes money. So it's okay because the money is moving. Again, it's only when we stop moving money that things get sort of bad. Okay, so other things that come out of the Treaty of Versailles. First off, we have the League of Nations, which is the UN, the United Nations, but with less teeth. So weak, ineffectual, and spearheaded by the U.S. President Woodrow Wilson, who ends up not joining because he goes back to the United States and he's like, this is a great idea. And the United States is like, yo, we didn't want to get involved in this in the first place. We're going back to isolationism. So the U.S. is like, count me out, bro. And the rest of Europe is like, okay. But they are created off of Wilson's 14 points, which are basically like, hey, man, you should let countries do what they want. But some other things. that Germany has to do. Germany also has to keep their army super small. They are not allowed to really acquire arms or militarize at all. There's some very strict moratoriums being put on there. They lose their navy, kind of a thing. There's all kinds of really, really strict restrictions about their military. Strict restrictions. Sorry, cracks me up. Germany has to admit all responsibility for World War I, which I think is kind of hilarious considering that that's not really their fault. And then Austria-Hungary is all broken up into a whole bunch of new countries. Parts of Germany are given to other winning countries, so its assets are divvied up among the winners. I can't remember how many of these there are in divvied, so I'm just gonna add a couple more. Divvied. It's like 8. Divvied up among the winners, because again, there's decolonialism, the giving back of colonies, but only for the losers. All of the people who won the war have so many colonies still. And also a whole bunch of new countries are created out of Austria-Hungary. So Austria-Hungary is no more. And now we have countries like, oh my gosh, Poland! Poland gets to be a country for like 10 whole years. Estonia, because even though Russia gave places like Estonia and Lithuania to Germany, because Germany lost, it gets to be its own country now. Hooray! Finland! I'd forgotten about Finland. Because Russia had conquered Finland too, and then they were like, take Finland, Germany. Japan is not invited. So Japan is over here. They are looking on, and they are sad because they were not invited. Now, the reason they are not invited, even though they are part of the winning side, they came in the war against the Central Powers, and they seized Germany's possessions in the Pacific and had fought using their navy. The reason they weren't invited was mostly because of racism, and the League of Nations and all of the people who were heading up the Treaty of Versailles were like, yeah, but like, you're not white, so like, why should we invite you? And Japan is like, yo, just because we're not white doesn't mean we're less than people or less worthy of a seat at the table. And all the representatives at the Treaty of Versailles were like, no. That's exactly the point. You are not white, therefore you are less worthy of representation or consideration. And Japan is like, that's the rudest thing ever. How dare you? I'm annoyed at this. I'm going to go over and conquer China and create my own empire over in Asia. And then these guys don't pay attention, and Japan's over there, like, beating the crap out of Korea and stuff like that. And then finally, during World War II, Japan is like, yo, we're going to protect our oil interests in the South Pacific. So, United States, if you come over trying to, like, get our oil, we're going to whack you real hard on the shins with our big stick. How do you like that, Teddy Roosevelt? And we, start making things difficult for Japan to get their oil. And Japan is like, yo, we warned you. Here we come. And Pearl Harbor. There's lots of other factors that go into that, but, like, that's a good start. Look, new countries. Oh, boy. Okay. Also, the Red Baron is super cool. We should mention him because he's awesome. He was an actual baron, which in and of itself is super cool. And he was an ace. To be an ace, you had to have at least 5 confirmed kills in aerial combat. He recorded the most aerial kills of any pilot in World War I, 80. So he killed 80 people in the air in one of those primitive planes that are terrifying to ride in. He became the commander of what was known as the Flying Circus, which was a hand-picked pilot unit in 1917. And this is where Monty Python gets their whole thing from. Monty Python's Flying Circus is what their television show was called, in case you were wondering. Also in 1917, the Red Baron sustained a head wound in flight. It caused disorientation and partial blindness, but he regained consciousness in time to not only right his plane, but to land it. And then he had to have a bunch of surgeries to like fix everything. And then he was like, all right, I'm feeling better now. Let's go back up because you can't keep the Red Baron out of the sky, apparently. So when he went back up in 1918 during a dogfight, he was shot in the chest from a gun on the ground. Just one. And he managed to land his plane before he died. Dude, like, that is so cool. That's just like so cool, man. Really neat. And actually, that seems like it is the end of the lecture. Oh my gosh, I have 12 seconds left. That is so fantastic. I hope you have enjoyed learning about World War I. We will definitely be talking about this more in your homework and stuff like that. But for now, that's all she wrote. Thanks, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. It is Friday here in Miss Knappenberger land, so I hope you have a fabulous Friday, and I hope you have a fabulous weekend. If it is not Friday where you're at in time right now, sorry. It'll be Friday again soon, though, because that's how time works. So, bye.